Hi, my name is Rachel Elder, and I am a therapist and owner of Connected Couples Counseling. And this is our monthly blog post video vlog, which is a little bit different than just reading the blog post. I like to put my own spin and relatability to it. But this month, I wrote about why the mental load matters in our marriages or our relationships. And I'd like to start you with a real story. And what kind of sparked this? I actually was sitting down. I always write this a month before. So you're seeing this a few weeks later, but I sat down and I tried to write about the danger of threatening divorce in your relationship. It's something I see often in my work, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be a great blog topic. And I only could get 3 sentences out because I was like, my brain is not there. My brain is not processing that. And instead, my brain was saying, I am so overwhelmed. The mental load in my brain is exhausting, it's fatiguing, I'm burning myself out. And the unfortunate part is most of it was my own doing. I think oftentimes when we hear about the mental load in the world, there is kind of a stigma, and some of it is valid and true, that the mental load is primarily associated with women in our life, in our world. And the way I look at mental load is that everybody has a mental load. Children, teens, your husband, your partner. It's not just female oriented. And I think society can also kind of train um, females to take on more of that mental emotional load that comes up. But I want to preference that. Like, I believe everyone has a mental load and it all matters. But this was Wednesday last week. Obviously, you're seeing this a few weeks later, but I hit the max of my mental load. Like, I could tell, my work was being impacted, my emotions, my normal coping skills aren't working anymore or having the same impact. And I'm struggling. I'm just struggling with it all. I'd gone to multiple appointments with my daughter that week. I was running an event. I was needed at friendship connection pieces. Like it was all good things, but it was exhausting of okay, now I need to schedule that next appointment. And now I need to make sure we get to this place on time. And then I have a client at just coordination of appointments and life and all the steps that come with each event was just, I was at my max. And so, one thing I'm trying to practice in my own marriage is being vulnerable and leaning on my partner, depending on them, not going to my Miss Independent adaptive state of I don't need anyone, I got this. Because that has been helpful for surviving in my life, but it's not helpful in my marriage. And so, my husband and I hadn't been able to prep meals for our family. It's basically been everybody for themselves. So we're all eating separate meals, which is probably a lot more work than making meals together, but that's not the point. So I've made my daughter food, I'm making myself food, my husband's making himself food. And he's like, "How was your day?" And I was like, "It was fine." Right? Like there's emotion behind what I'm saying, but I'm like, I just don't want to go there. I'm so fatigued. And he does the right thing by saying, I can just tell you're having a hard time. Like, what's going on? Like, how was your day? And he says, I say in my head, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna lean on you and depend on you. Except for the fact I'm at my max. And so I really needed to preference that. And in that emotional state, I felt like I did. I feel like I'm just hungry, so I'm emotional. But I turned around and I just said, I'm maxed out. All the mental load I'm feeling, I am maxed out. And my husband is trying to be empathetic and validating, and he's doing a good job for his development. Like this is a work in progress. I study this for a living. He's learning from what I model, he's learning from what I teach, but this is something that's being developed in our marriage. And I just keep going because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna lean on you. So I'm gonna give it all. Like I am leaning on you. I'm at a max. I am going to throw this all your way, which is really unfair from my perspective because I don't think I had fully processed exactly what was going on. But in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm doing something different. I'm going to depend on you. And I just laid it all out from all of this and the things that I feel like I have to remind you with, and the things that I'm doing that I feel unseen and that you're not picking up the slack with. There was a lot of This is how I'm feeling, and I'm doing it in a non-aggressive manner. I tend to be very aggressive when I hit my max. I'm trying to do it in a vulnerable way, but it was a lot. Like if I'm looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, it was a little too much to throw his way as we're trying to both make dinner for ourselves and kind of meet our physical hunger needs. And so there was some goodness and some things I would go back and do differently. Um, but I just kind of lay it out. And we get into a huge conflict. What I'm saying, something goes on where he's like, this is too much. I need a break, which sent me into the spiral of like, I'm too much. My emotions are a burden. I can't lean on anyone. I was hyperventilating, in my bedroom, trying to calm down. And we eventually work it out. We got some work to do in how we manage cycles. So, coming as a couples therapist, we are not perfect. We are also trying to do what we teach, and it's much easier to teach it than do it, I will say. But I just hit a mental load state, and that energy carried with me throughout the next few days to the point that I was like, I need a digital detox. Like, I need to stop distracting myself or numbing out with social media or being on my phone. We had planned the weekend to be together as a family little adventure vacation for the weekend. And so I was like, I'm going to be very intentional to not be on my phone too much. I used my phone to take pictures. I checked email a few times just because the business never stops. I wanted to make sure clients were supported. But for the most part, I was really boundaried up. I'm not getting on Instagram. I'm not getting on Facebook a ton. Still work in progress. But I hit that place where I was like, I need a break. I need my brain to not be filled with so much so it can breathe again. And so that's the story of like where this blog post came from of my own lived experience and wanting to talk about why it's important to understand why it's so popular, the mental load kind of conversation. But I also want to highlight that my husband has a mental load too. My daughter has a mental load. The mental load isn't about who has a bigger one or has more on their plate. It's about understanding that it's real and exists. And often what we're each carrying, the other person is not fully aware of. And that's not like you're doing it wrong. We want to dialogue more. We want to bring that conversation to the table of like, hey, by the way, like here's all that's on my plate this week. Here's how I'm feeling about it, and here's where I could use some support. But that's a both way conversation. It's not just if I use my own example, like I was taking her to all these appointments last week. That's kind of the flexibility of my job. And that's something we have mutually agreed to as a married partnership of like, this is what I'm doing. And like, I will lean on him when I need help. But we have both made that decision together. And while I was doing all these appointments, I could easily say, like, I've got more than you. And that conversation doesn't help. And it doesn't in my case, it wouldn't have met what I was needing. What I was needing is to be seen and heard. For my partner to just say, like, that is a lot. I hear it. And not necessarily to fix it, right? That's my responsibility if I'm saying, like, I need help. I need something to be different. I need to invite that and name that with him. And sometimes I just want to be seen. And that's what I was needing the most because he did try to fix it, try to support in that way. And it's not what I was needing in that moment. I really just needed him to understand all I was carrying. So let's talk about some common examples of the mental load. Remembering appointments, scheduling them, planning meals, creating new meals, shopping for meals, creating chore charts, reward charts, growth charts, being the emotional, mental support person for the family. There's a whole list and there's a very personalized list. So for me, last week, what happened was I made it to the occupational therapy appointment and made sure another one was scheduled. I made it to physical therapy appointment and making sure our next steps from graduating from that. I had to confirm a dentist appointment. I prepped chicken, so I had lunch for the rest of the week. I had to text a student or a mom of a student because their lunchbox came home with us instead of our lunchbox. I went through the closet to go through like smaller clothes in my daughter's closet. I was creating obstacle courses for her sensory integration. I was remembering to blow up a unicorn for a water play date, and I registered for a summer camp. And I made this for the blog post and I had to stop because I started to get overwhelmed again. I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't even everything. But that's an example of like a personalized mental load. This wasn't anything that my husband was like, this is your responsibility. You do this. But this is what my brain was doing, right? I did agree to do the appointments because my schedule is more flexible than his. But he didn't say, hey, prep yourself chicken for the week. That was my own doing. He didn't say, hey, plan a water play date for our daughter. That was my own doing. So much of this was like me seeing opportunities or needs and saying, like, this needs to be on my list. And it is overwhelming. What I was thinking about though is like what's on his list. And how I manage my mental load list and how he manages his mental load list is different. And I just had to keep reminding myself like it's not about who's doing it better or what's on the list or how much is on the list. It is about the fact I have one and he has one. And as partners, we need to be emotionally supporting one another. And because I fall into that Miss Independent, I got this, I don't need anyone mentality a lot, I have to learn how to actually turn to him when I'm not at my maxed out state and say, like, hey, here's everything I've got on my kind of calendar for the week or like what needs to get done from my perspective this week. So he's aware of, oh, wow, like it's a busier week for Rachel or it's a lighter week for Rachel. That's great. And helping me just know, like, hey, you have a lighter week. Maybe you don't put more on the to-do list this week, or hey, we don't have any plans this weekend. Maybe we keep it that way intentionally, just so that there's freedom to rest and relax and play. Or as he said to me yesterday, like we walked around for hours at this theme park and then we went swimming. And then you came home and you did a leg workout. Like you don't learn, woman. You are too productive, which is true, which leads to my mental overwhelm and the mental load I feel. But our goal in partnership is actually to have awareness to support one another, not to do the tit for tat or I've got more than you or my stuff is more important than yours, but to recognize for us to have a relationship that works, we are a team. Each things that we are pouring into mentally, emotionally, physically to support our life together, our family, our vision, it requires both of us participating. And that means we need to be aware of what is on each other's mental and emotional load or to-do lists for the week. So we can say, how can I support you with this? Or I see you, I see what you're taking on, I see what you're supporting, and to feel connected in that way. And so I share my own story because I am still growing in this area. I literally, I have learned to be proud of being Miss Independent, of I got this, I can figure things out. And it's actually been really hard for me to rewire my brain to say, it's okay, even if I can figure this out, to lean on my husband in this way, to say, I can do this, and I I'm gonna ask for your help. I'm gonna ask for your support. I'm gonna let us work at it as a team instead of me on my own over here. And with the mental load, I think that dynamic, like I'm not the only person who's Miss Independent. I think this is a dynamic we all can fall into of valuing independence over dependence in our relationship. And the mental load's a really good example of that. And I think what I would encourage is for there to be more conversation in your relationship about that mental load, the emotional load, the to-do list. To say, hey, I just want to bring you into awareness of what I've got on the calendar or kind of on my awareness for this week. And then for you to say, like, is there something I need support-wise from my partner? Maybe it's just emotional encouragement throughout the week. Maybe it's the, can I hand this off to you because this is feeling really heavy? Would you be willing to take this off my list? And to be open to a yes or a no. It can't just be an expectation because that's a different conversation. But if they're like, I wish I could, and I also have a very full mental load this week, for us to have a dialogue of, okay, is there another way we can delegate this? Or maybe reprioritize what needs to get done this week, but to work with two brains together and being a team in it. So, a little bit of a different take on the mental load. Instead of it just being like it's an only female or woman identified piece, I think the reality is, as humans, we all have a mental load. We all have an emotional and physical load. And it doesn't benefit us to say who has more on their list or what's on my list is more important than what's on your list. What benefits us is to say, like, I see you, you see me, I want to support you, you want to support me. Let's be a team at this. So that's my input. I'm curious for you how you've navigated the mental load in your relationship, tips that you would suggest, or kind of what stuck out to you with this approach. Until next month, we'll see you then.